Welcome, pre-algebra students, to lesson 7.3, percentage increase and decrease, beginning on page 164, going through page 168. We did touch on this a little bit last year in level 6, but to review, first of all, we're going to concentrate on percentage increase. To calculate a percentage increase, you first need to know the increase in value of a quantity from its original value. The new value, therefore, would be the increased value. Therefore, increase is equal to the increased value minus the original value. And you can come up with this formula then for percentage of increase. We go increase over the original value times 100%. So you calculate the increase by subtracting, finding the difference between the increased value and the original value. You turn that into a fraction with the increase as the numerator, the original value as the denominator, and you multiply it by 100% as we have learned in previous lessons working with percentage. So having all those thoughts in mind and those notes taken down, let's go to Try It 9 at the top of 165. Try It 9 reads, Mrs. Lee's monthly expenses increased from $3,200 to $3,400. Find the percentage increase in her expenses. So to find that increase, I would find the difference between the increase in the original as the numerator. I would put as my denominator the original, and I'm going to multiply it by 100%. So after I find the difference, that's 200 over 3,200 times 100%. Eliminating zeros and reducing the fraction, I have 1/16 of 100%. Putting that into my calculator, I calculate that to be 6.25% increase. Continuing on with example 10. Example 10 reads, excuse me while I get this set up, there we go. Example 10 reads, a store sold 250 shirts last week. The sales of shirts increased by 16% this week. Find the sales volume for this week. There's two ways to do this. We have an increase. We start at 250 and we're increasing it by 16%. So it's 250 times that increase percentage, 16%. Putting that into my calculator, I calculate that increase to be 40 shirts. So the sales volume this week then, since it was an increase of 40 shirts, I add last week's sales to this week's sales, and I have an increased selling this week of 290 shirts. Another way we can do this is method 2, and it seems like our textbook likes this method. So what they do for the sales volume for this week is they take the 100% from last week that they sold, add the percent of increase, so 100 plus 16% times 250. Well, 100 plus 16 is 116. I change that percentage into a fraction, 116 over 100 times 250. After calculating that on my calculator, I am given the answer of 290 shirts. So method 2 basically says increased value, the actual value would be 100% to start with plus the increased percentage times the original value or original number of whatever you're trying to figure out. So that would be a formula to write down and definitely remember. Okay, so continuing on, we will go on to Triad 11, the top of the next page. Let me get this all situated. Triad 11 reads like this. A boy's height is 133 centimeters at the end of a year. His height increased by 6.4% during this year. Find his height at the beginning of the year. Okay, now we got to go backwards. So the boy's height at the beginning of the year, we're going to just say is h centimeters. So it says that 133, now remember that's the end of the year. 133 centimeters would be the height at the beginning times the percentage of increase, which is 100% to start off with, plus the 6.4, whatever that is. Therefore, 133 is going to be, now this is interesting because they take that percentage, 106.4%, turn it into the fraction of 106.4 over 100, and at this time they actually change it into a decimal because it makes calculating a little bit easier. So remember, when you divide anything by 100, you're moving your decimal point over to the left 2 places, and that way I get the decimal of 1.064. Now I just solve for h by eliminating things, which actually turns out the height at the end of the year divided by my decimal, the percent of increase, is going to equal the height at the beginning of the year, which is 125. And go through all this to get this set up. Calculating that into my calculator, I find out the height at the beginning of the year is 125 centimeters. Now I'm dividing here because going backwards I would divide, whereas earlier in Triad 10 I was going ahead, and that would be multiplying. Okay, switching gears. That is all about percentage of increase. Now we're going to talk about percentage of decrease. So to calculate a percent decrease, we have to know the decrease in value of a quantity from its original value. Again, we find the difference. And the new value would be the decreased value. However, this time the decreased value is the original value minus the decreased value. And the decreased value is 100% minus the decreased percent times the original value, where the decreased percent is the percentage of decrease. Okay. Sounds like a lot of gobbledygook at this time, but let's put it to practical use and try it out. And we're going to go to the top of page 167 to Triad 12, and we're going to get this into some practical use. Okay, so Triad 12 reads, the water level in a tank decreased from 30 inches to 25.5 inches. Find the percentage decrease in the water level. Okay, so the decrease in the height of the water level went from 30 to 25.5. So the difference between that is 4.5 inches. The second step, percentage of decrease in the height of the water level. So you take your difference, 4.5, put it over the original of 30 and multiply it by 100%. So you calculate that on your calculator, exactly as written, and you find out that the percent of decrease is 15%. Okay, moving on to Triad 13. The air temperature of a town was 32 degrees centigrade. It decreased by 12.5% after a heavy rain. What was the new temperature? Okay, so it's got to be lower than 32. I just got to keep that in mind because if it goes higher, I did something wrong. So our new temperature would be the temperature now, 32 degrees centigrade. I'm going to multiply it by the original, which is 100%, and I'm going to decrease it by 12.5%. So I subtract 32 degrees centigrade by 87.5%. I'm changing this to a decimal. I'm just moving my decimal point over 2 spaces, which is 0.875. I multiply the two and I am calculating it to be 28 degrees centigrade. Continuing on with try it 14 at the top of page 167, which reads, Mrs. Austin's weight dropped to 62 kilograms after her weight decreased by 7%. What was her original weight? And give your answer correct to the nearest kilogram. So I'm going to work back to her original weight, and then I need to remember my final answer needs to be rounded to the nearest kilogram. So I'm going to set this up. Mrs. Austin's original weight is what I'm looking for, is going to be m kilograms. So this is the drop, 62 is going to be her original weight times the percent of decrease, which is 100% minus 7%, which is 93%. Now again, I change that to a fraction, move my decimal point over, 0.93. Now because I'm going backwards, I'm not multiplying, I'm dividing. So I'm going to take that present weight, 62, I'm going to divide it by the percent of decrease, 0.93, to get back to my original weight. After doing that, after calculating that, I have 66.7, which is equal to X. But now I've got to remember, I got to round it to the nearest kilogram, which means I'm rounding it to 67 kilograms. Okay, so the way I have this lesson divided up is the first day of work, we will be concentrating on percentage of increase. And then on the second day, we will be concentrating on percent of decrease. So what I'd like you to do, now that you have your notes, is go back. Listen to the first part of this lesson again that only concentrates on percent increase. We'll do our lesson. Tomorrow you can fast forward and listen once again to the percent decrease. As you listen, just follow along in your notes and internalize what you're hearing. Again, stop, rewind, re-listen as often as necessary. If you have questions, please ask. I will give you your assignment in class because it is rather complicated because we bounce all over the next 2 pages, just getting the increases and decreases. Okay, thank you. And do good math.